If you've been a long-time viewer of the channel, you'll know that I've been pretty supportive when it comes to Intel's foray into discrete graphics. I'm sure we can all agree that more competition in this marketplace would be excellent. However, the resources to compete in discrete graphics is, well, a major obstacle for any company wishing to compete seriously against either Nvidia or AMD. But this duopoly certainly hasn't been the best for gamers. Things like the cryptocurrency mining craze, and just overall, if one generation of products from one company isn't particularly great, we're basically left with only one option, which again kind of sucks for us as customers and just means that there's this innovation in the market and it's just not as exciting. The first generation of products from Intel, Alchemist, has shown some promise with impressive ray tracing performance, decent upscaling options, but there have been a number of drawbacks, mostly when it comes to the software side of things. We'll be discussing more about that in just a moment, but basically legacy games in particular using DirectX 9 have really fell behind, and there are still stability issues with the drivers. In this video then, I want to really focus on Intel's foray into discrete graphics. We're going to be looking at a couple of roadmaps that I've gotten sent, performance targets for both Battlemage as well as Celestial, and overall what I feel the state of affairs is over at Intel when it comes to their vision of discrete graphics. We're also going to discuss a little bit more about RTX 50/Blackwell from Nvidia and tackle the really big elephant that's not doing a particularly great job hiding behind the lampshade in the room, and that is the whole RDNA 3 issues with, well, you know what I'm going to say before I even finish that sentence, but, well, we're going to get into all of this after this message from the video's sponsor. If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices. So let's get some obvious things out of the way. Intel's roadmaps can change, just like any companies, and we're going to look at some slides I was sent over soon enough. But there have been a number of big things within Intel, which means the likelihood of a roadmap changing is actually truer than usual. I don't want to get too much into the nitty-gritty and internal politics structure within Intel because, quite honestly, that could be like a 4-hour video. But it is hard to ignore some of the big managerial changes which have affected Intel graphics. Raja Koduri is now focusing more on product development rather than the day-to-day running of AXG, which has now in effect been split into two divisions. Basically, we have the retail customer, i.e. gamers, and AI HPC end customers. Now, I'll leave a link to the Tom's Hardware article if you missed it, but I'm going to give you guys a really brief catch-up. Raja Koduri recently needed to undergo major back surgery and is now recovering. He posted about this on Twitter. Now, how much this actually ties in to the changes over at Intel, I'm not too certain, and I don't really want to speculate, but in essence, he's no longer the lead over at AXG, and he's going to be basically the visionary, spearheading development on things like GPU, CPU, and other architectures. Lisa Pierce, who had previously been the head of much of the driver and software development over at Intel Graphics, will now take the helm of AXG's business unit, albeit under CCG, or Client Compute Group within Intel. Basically, that group have been essentially focused on client-side CPUs, so we're basically seeing them expanding their vision. Lisa Pierce will in turn report to Michelle Johnston-Holhouse, who is the head over at CCG. Meanwhile, staff such as Ponte Vico, i.e. data center focused products, will move under the DCAI, or Data Center and AI Business Unit. Jeff McVeigh will be heading this up, and he will be reporting to Sandra Rivera, who is the head over at DCAI. Naturally, all of this is a very recent development, and how it affects Intel's products, not just GPUs going forward, it's way too early to know and speculate. But as usual, I'm sure that there won't be any shortages of speculation and rumours, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years. With that said though, let's look at some of the roadmaps and some of the basics, shall we? So in the shorter term, if Intel's graphical journey is to continue, they of course need to focus on evolving their drivers. We've actually seen a number of big updates from the team recently focused on performance of legacy titles which use older APIs such as DirectX 9. Those were previously handled with really heavy emulation layers at launch and clearly incurred a performance penalty. I have to say that I'm very impressed with the work Intel have done here. You could argue that they shouldn't have released the drivers in the state they were initially, but either way, you know, the fact that they have been improving them is always obviously a good thing. Also, another thing that was public, and for those of you with a more technical mind, you probably have maybe put two and two together here with Raja Koduri, because he stated basically that gamers want, well, a 200 watt TDP GPU, generally speaking. Now this of course essentially means that we could kind of predict what Intel were doing with Battlemage, which is ARC's successor, because obviously you're not going to say, well, you know what, gamers want like a 225 watt card, and then a couple of weeks later, well, okay, more than a couple of weeks, and we'll get into release schedules in just a moment, release like a 500 watt monster. That just doesn't make sense. But now, enough talking, let's look at the roadmaps. You'll spot Alchemist Plus, which, as the name would imply, isn't particularly exciting. It's essentially a refresh of the current line of SKUs. There's no major architectural changes here. So in essence, it's more of the same, albeit faster and more efficient. Faster clocks, more speed, but ultimately there's nothing super exciting to say about Alchemist for its refresh. It will be for both desktop and mobile, and about half a year ago I'd already leaked that this was being worked on. So according to this recent internal Intel roadmap, well, you can see it yourself. This refresh though, as you probably have seen from the roadmap, it won't be hitting the levels of performance enthusiasts would demand. Instead, this is going to be taken care of by Battlemage. Now, Battlemage and its release date, it's kind of interesting. I've stated a few times that I'd heard it was this year, which is kind of weird to say now because we've just hit 2023, but this doesn't seem to be the case now. It no longer seems to be the end of 2023, and this slide, as well as a couple of other sources, have verbally told me that more likely we'll see it in Q1/Q2. We'll get more into why there's a possible delay in a moment, but yeah, basically speaking, this is much later than perhaps would be an ideal candidate for release date. And it's probably as well while we're seeing the ARC refresh, or at least one of the reasons. I'm sure by the time the cards launch though, RDNA 4 rumours and RTX 50 rumours will be swarming in the news cycles, assuming the cards haven't even released by that point, although frankly I don't think RDNA 4 will launch by this point. Looking over the slides then, we can see architecture improvements, next generation ray tracing and AI, which seem to be a de facto upgrade for any modern GPU these days, next generation memory systems and compression. Not from the same source, but another source did tell me that we're looking at a much bigger cache system. More similar to RTX 40, but perhaps not quite as large. Now this is still a monolithic die, and I can't get this double sourced, so I would take this with a big grain of salt for now, but logically speaking it may make sense because we've seen similar from Intel's competitors, but that doesn't necessarily mean A, Intel will implement it in the same manner, and B, their architecture is different anyway. So how fast is Battlemage going to be? That's the real crux of the question, isn't it? Well, I've heard between RTX 4070 and 4080, with earlier rumours putting Battlemage closer to the 4070, and now many more rumours stating it's closer to the 4080. Now performance targets this far out, well, they're difficult to be certain of, because not only do you have obvious questions like, well, what is this performance of? Is it ray tracing performance? Is it raster? But even if it was, say, raster, FPS in a game, let's say God of War 2018, well, will it hit the clocks on final retail? Will there be any architectural issues which they couldn't iron out and therefore mean they don't hit their targets? And what about things like drivers and other software quirks? But so far, Battlemage does seem to be coming along quite nicely. From my understanding, Battlemage therefore is being designed around the mid-range to enthusiast market, topping out likely at low 200 watts. It's possible they may bump the TDP up a little bit, maybe if they feel like it could go to higher clock frequencies depending on final silicon. After all, we are again talking about chips which aren't out for well over a year. But the delay from launch, from my understanding so far, it seems to be basically due to additional tweaks and tucks in the architecture. Speculatively, and I stress this is speculatively, this could be the reason that I've heard the performance range from RTX 4070 to 4080, basically an upgrade due to these tweaks, but again, that is speculation. But Intel have already revealed several architectures. We've already officially known about Alchemist, of course, we've known about Battlemage, we know about Celestial, and we also know about Druid. While I don't have any info about Druid right now, I do have some info regarding Celestial. So, I have less info regarding Celestial than I do Battlemage, but there are some critical details I've managed to put together. Firstly, this is another big departure in architecture. Basically, it's a big overhaul, and Intel are pulling all of the relevant performance levers they can. According to several sources, Intel will be targeting Halo Nvidia products with Celestial. Now I assume this will mean Blackwell or even RTX 60, given the release date of Celestial logically will be about 2 years after Battlemage. This would make sense because presumably Blackwell released some point late 2024 or 2025. This is not a leak, by the way, it's just logical given Nvidia's typical release schedule. I also believe that Celestial will be designed around chiplets, or in Intel speak, should I say, tiles. More importantly, this will be the architecture Intel used to show off it can compete with the highest range products. And we can also presume that Rajar's 200 watts comments will be swept under the rug for that generation. Now, while I've actually mentioned Blackwell, I did want to mention just a couple of things regarding Blackwell that I tackled in a previous video. So I've had a couple of folks tell me that my information regarding the new SM structure for Blackwell is indeed correct. It appears to be the biggest overall architecture change Nvidia has employed in recent memory. And obviously, if you were to go back to, let's say, RTX 30 and then look at RTX 40 SMs, much of the basic structure is the same, albeit with some tweaks and updates. In a previous video, I'd also been told of a new bus which basically ties all of the various SMs together, and this again seems to be the case. Personally, I think Intel and AMD are going to be facing off against a really impressive competitor with Blackwell. I've been told that in terms of performance, it's an absolutely huge leap, much bigger than even RTX 30 to 40. Not just in terms of the performance, but also the structure and design and architecture. A big question though, of course, is whether Blackwell is going to be monolithic or chiplet. And internally, Nvidia allegedly are testing both solutions, and they haven't fully set a course yet. This could be perhaps one of the reasons that we're hearing so much conflicting information regarding Blackwell. Now, I want to stress, I have not seen block diagrams of Blackwell, and obviously to do so would be kind of difficult anyway at this stage, and certainly I don't have a complete laundry list of the architectural updates for the GPU. I'm making some educated guesses here, but given TSMC's own statements that SRAM's scaling using their free NM products, well, it leads to a lot of questions. I'll probably put out a separate video regarding this at some point, regarding free NM and scaling, but it'll be some point in the future, which is a magical point in time where YouTubers run out of ideas and they need to break open an ideas piggy bank for content for the day. But basically speaking, stuff on a CPU or GPU die, for example, doesn't shrink in the same manner on smaller processors. This is a ridiculously oversimplified explanation, but when you're thinking of shrinking a die from, let's say, 7nm down to 5nm, it doesn't scale like it does, say, an image in Photoshop if you were to use the transform tool. It just doesn't work like that, because some elements of a GPU scale, for example a GPU, scale pretty well, like SMs, but other elements like SRAM, well, they don't scale so well. Now, given we're looking at pesky little things like die costs, production, yield, plus of course, the reticle limit of silicon, it gets rather difficult to know what Nvidia would do. In theory, they could make a die which is similar to their current behemoths like RTX 30 and 40 flagships, but would that add enough additional CUDA cores? Perhaps, or perhaps not. To my understanding, the performance leap for Blackwell is absolutely tremendous. It's huge. In fact, according to one of my sources, been pretty accurate over a lot of stuff for RTX 40. It's one of the biggest leaps we've seen in many generations. But perhaps to do this, they would need to go MCM. Another possibility is Nvidia have just improved the SM and CUDA core efficiency and utilization, clock frequencies and more. Honestly, I'll be following this really closely because I'm going to be very interested to see what happens. I believe that Nvidia's main focus with future GPU generations is of course going to be ray tracing performance and its next generation of GeForce products. Ultimately, Nvidia's goal seems to not just be real-time hybrid ray tracing, but high resolution and high frame rate path traced experiences. So before we get onto the AMD discussion, I do want to just give a few final thoughts regarding Intel. At the end of the day, things are still, well, let's say quite early in Intel's journey for discrete graphics. At the end of the day, a company like Nvidia have had many generations of products, many years to improve their drivers and to get things just right. With that said, I think Intel over the past several months alone have made tremendous strides in their drivers, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the changes at Intel in terms of, well, the business solutions and the way that they've reorganized their divisions actually impact things. Honestly, I'm still rather hopeful for Intel in the longer term. I really do feel genuinely like we do need a third player, whether it's Intel or someone else. And quite frankly, I feel that computer graphics are moving on pretty quickly at this point, but there are still a number of technologies, of course, which, well, we're still waiting for Nvidia, for example, to even move to chiplets, at least officially. It's going to be a very interesting couple of years as ray tracing becomes more and more prevalent in the industry, and we start to see high refresh rate displays like 4K 120Hz become even more commonplace. Not to mention the fact that the next generation consoles are now, well, very current generation consoles, with the PS5 and Xbox Series X being a couple of years old, and it's very likely, from what I'm hearing, that there will be a mid-generation refresh which is significantly more powerful. So now I'm going to tackle the AMD situation with two distinct topics, the first of which is the hardware side of things, and then a small update for myself regarding the drivers and software. So most of you are probably aware at this point that RDNA 3, specifically the 7900 XT and XTX, have been in the news quite a bit regarding 110 degree hotspots, and also, of course, just in general, the clock frequency hasn't been hitting where it should be, and this seems to have been impacting reference designs. A number of people were asking, am I going to cover this? And of course, the answer was always going to be yes. But one, I was sick as a dog over Christmas, unfortunately, and the second issue is that, well, I just wanted to hear more information because I was hearing so much conflicting info. Now, AMD themselves have actually issued an official statement. AMD have said the following: we are working to determine the cause of unexpected performance limitation of the AMD RX 7900 XTX graphics card. Based on our observation to date, we believe the issue is related to the thermal solution used in AMD's reference design and is occurring in a limited number of cards sold. We are working to resolve this issue for the affected cards. Customers experiencing unexpected limitations should contact AMD support. Of course, I will leave a link in the video description for you guys to check that out. And as always, I would encourage you, if you are experiencing issues, to actually, get them resolved. Don't just, have a card which isn't working, which I've actually had one person ask me, should I, RMA the card? What should I do? Should I wait for them to, just please contact them, because obviously at the end of the day, this is your hard-earned money and these things are expensive. It's not like, you're buying a pack of gum. But with that said, it does seem to be an issue with the cooler, and there have been a number of folks who have started to do investigations with this. We've seen Igor over Igor's lab, we've also seen Dorbauer, and there have been a number of tests, and basically it seems to be an issue with the actual cooler itself. I will leave a link in the video description where you can check out more information, but basically speaking, this is not an issue, of course, which can be updated with firmware. Which brings an obvious question: should this have been, noted during quality assurance or whatever? And the reality is, like, it's way too early at this point to know how many cards are affected. I think it was Igor's lab that said it could be thousands of cards potentially, but is it just a specific batch of coolers that were a problem? How actually widespread is this? Is it specific regions were hit more than others? We don't honestly know. It does, however, seem to only be the reference card. So if you were not planning to get the reference card, it does seem like it's a-okay. And basically speaking, the cards should operate normally. Now, N31 has obviously had quite a lot of criticism regarding it, and I think some of it is AMD's kind of own fault. Obviously, one of the big issues that they really kind of brought upon themselves is the push for energy efficiency, where it was saying, it's 50% more efficient than RDNA 2 and so on and so on. And honestly, I do feel that AMD's design for RDNA 3 is actually pretty impressive. It's no secret, I've said multiple times, I do think there is a refresh in the pipeline, but whether that actually ever gets released or whether it's true or not, who the hell knows. So I have had someone reach out to me who's been pretty reliable in the past and tell me that AMD are working on driver updates, and one should drop fairly soon, and it should help improve performance and energy efficiency of the 7000 series. Now, this was somewhat backed up by another really good source who gave me a lot of info back in the day, and they told me, from what they understand from their contacts, well, let's just say AMD's software engineers were pulling double duty over Christmas. Now, at the end of the day, though, I am not going to tell you guys that a software driver is going to release and it's going to significantly improve performance and you should buy a graphics card based on that or whatever, because who knows what really is going to happen in the long run. Like, even if I am right and the driver does release, how much of an advantage is it going to make, how much a performance increase is it going to give, and so on and so on and so on. And of course, naturally the big question is, anyway, is that going to be enough to sway you from the RTX 40 series? Honestly, the RTX 40 series, the RTX 4070 Ti has just launched, and it's really expensive. I think the cut in the memory bus has not exactly helped matters, but it's one of those product launches where it's not exciting. Like, it's not, I don't know, like the GTX 970. It's not like a GTX 1070 kind of thing where you feel like you're almost ripping off Nvidia because of the amount of performance you're getting. Instead, it's a card which does its job. But obviously it's really expensive ultimately for a 70 class card, and that's not really controversial for me to say. It's still kind of weird to me that the RTX 4090, at least in my personal opinion, as weird as it is to say, is the better value from the RTX 40 series, which I don't even know how to, like, I like, my brain is like short-circuiting just saying that the RTX 4090 is the best value, and it's like God knows how much cash in your region. But it does seem like, honestly, it is like the best card. But ultimately, we do know as well that, the 4090 Ti is going to be incoming as well. Getting back to AMD though, ultimately, I do feel that they can pull things back with RDNA 3, especially with a refresh for N31 and also the mid to low range. It's going to be very interesting to see what's announced at CES. Obviously, we're going to find out a lot more about this in, well, just a few hours after I've recorded this video. But the next couple of years are going to be very interesting in computing, and that is putting it mildly. And it's going to be very curious to see how Intel managed to compete, if they do at all. Ultimately, and I'm going to close out the video here, while the rumors of Celestial competing with Halo level of performance from Nvidia are cool, and I am very excited at that prospect, I don't actually care about it as much as I do great value products that are in like the $300, $400, $500 mark kind of thing. Because again, how many people can afford like, you know, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 or more on a bloody graphics card? Anyway, guys, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. With any luck, we will see Battlemage available at a decent price and hopefully without any more delays. It's going to be very interesting, though, to see how all of this shapes up, especially when we start to see rumors of, like, RTX 50 and the RX, I don't know, whatever it'll be called, but it's called the RX 8000 series cards. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.